number 88, Mastering Modern Selling. Brandon, welcome. Good to see you. 88.
Good to see everybody. Good to see you, Tom.
And Kristie, welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be back.
2.5 times, I hear.
2.5
You've been on the show now.
Yeah.
That's right.
Woohoo!
Well, I totally crashed the party one time.
You're like the Alec Baldwin of Saturday Night Live for Mastering Modern Selling.
Nice. I'm not sure I want my name associated with that currently, but okay.
And that's fair. Well, just the fact that he's, I think he's still the one that's been the host the most.
Yeah, most times. Okay, no shortage of topics for him to discuss, I'm sure.
Yes, so I have a feeling he won't be a guest for a while.
Either.
Isn't he on our list?
If ever.
He's on our list. Yeah.
Yes.
Tom, you better get him. You better get him quick. There may become a time period where he's not available to just talk to you.
That's right.
We can fit the show in around visiting hours. Sorry, I had to.
There was too much fuel for that fire.
That's right.
I bet we get a lot of engagement. Let's just put it that way.
There you go.
Nice.
Yeah, it actually might be a good strategy. So, Okay, well, let's get focused. Welcome everybody. If you're on the podcast, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you. We've been watching our reviews go up, which is awesome. Thank you all for doing that. If you haven't reviewed and we add value to you, we would really, really appreciate the review. It helps us get in front of more people, and we're all here to help each other, right? And if you're joining us live on LinkedIn or YouTube or even my Facebook group, I throw it in there as well. Let us know who you are, where you're at. And of course, as you know, we want to welcome all your questions, join the conversation, and have your word be heard.
I like it.
And I guess it looks like we may not see Carson today, Brandon.
Carson got pulled into a meeting about 5 minutes before we went live. So I got the text with the sad face. So, okay. But Kristie, you're going to keep becoming the Carson sub.
That's right.
I know. Like I may throw myself some of my own questions today.
Yeah, let's do it.
Hey, we're going to have to get Carson on as a guest here soon.
Right.
That's right. So, all right, Butch, thanks for joining us. Good to see you on here. And let's jump in because I think what I really appreciate with you joining us today, Kristie, is this topic is so relevant right now. It's top of mind with a lot of people. I think we're going to go down a couple of different paths, which I'm excited about. There's some things that, for everybody listening, we may go down some paths that aren't like perfectly relevant to selling, but they are because it's all about our emotions, our feelings, our fears, the challenges, the headwinds, the topics of conversation that so many people are having right now, and how we turn those into opportunities instead of speed bumps or worse, brick walls.
Yeah. So Kristie, for those who haven't heard you the 2.5 other times before, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and then we'll jump into our key topic today, which is intentional moves in your career.
I am Kristie Jones. I am a consultant that works with mostly VC-backed earlier stage startups, but for sure I work with privately owned companies. So the public domain is really not my swim lane, not my specialty. I have been in SaaS as a SaaS sales leader since 2000. In 2016, I started my own consultancy business, and I really do 3 things exclusively. One, helping companies build out their sales processes or improve those. Everything from documenting them out in the playbook to making sure that they tie to the CRM system, which I think is so important. But I always say a lot of times the people aren't broken, but the processes are. So I can hire great people for you, but if the processes are broken, then the best A player I can find you won't be able to help. Which leads me to thing 2. I'm spending a lot of my time right now doing what I call hiring help. So I project manage the hiring process. You are never alone with the candidate. I am hand-holding you all along the way to make sure that you get the best candidates possible. I'm currently engaged in a couple of, we just found a VP of sales for a client I was working for and just made the offer a week or so ago, and he's going to start in a couple weeks. So I'm excited about that. Right now I'm finalizing some hiring around 3 AEs for a SaaS company, as well as an enterprise account executive for a pretty early stage company in the cybersecurity and cloud space. So spending a lot of time helping companies. Right now, there's Tom, as we sort of talked about offline, there are a lot of companies hiring, and there are a lot of sales professionals looking for roles. So call me matchmaker. I like to make sure I'm putting the right people in the right roles with the right companies. So I'm spending a lot of time doing that. And then I've got a book coming out in August. So I'm starting, I'm doing a lot of podcasts. I'm doing a lot of speaking around the topic of helping people pick the right sales roles in the right companies, in the right industries, selling the right thing in the right market to the right people to get to the top 10%.
So, you mentioned there's a lot of jobs available. You hear a lot, especially in the tech space, right, of all the layoffs and cuts and all of that. Are you thinking, is that kind of isolated in general, and you're seeing more across the broader set of VC funded companies, maybe Series A, Series B ish, seed, Series A, Series B, that they are still hiring and looking for good talent?
Yeah, it's interesting. If you go back a couple of years, because I work mostly in that space of the Series A funded organizations, when funding started to drop off in general, I got I kept saying to people like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to take every job coming my way as a consultant in 2022 and 2023, because 2024 might really suck for me. But what happened was funding did really, really drop off, but only at the B, C, D, F levels, at the higher levels with more mature companies. VCs and PEs were still investing in the earlier stage companies. There was more Series A money coming out than before. So again, feeling blessed as usual that those individuals who are, it's the hardest start, right? Like trying to get to that first $1 million, because you really can't get funding anymore until you hit that first $1 million mark. You've worked so hard to get there. There is money available for you. Again, sure, the vetting process is a little bit harder. People are being a little more selective. But business is as good for me as it's ever been. And I'm grateful because, these founders really need a chance, right? I mean, they've got something that people would have invested in easily 2 to 3 years ago. So I would say stay the course, don't give up.
So one more question, and then we can jump into the topic at hand. But, tech companies, right, have been sort of the antithesis of what we talk about in modern selling, right? Let's go hire a bunch of SDRs, hit the phones, tons of emails, which is the opposite of what we preach about on modern selling. Are you seeing any changes in mindset with the sales philosophy and approach and process with these, VC funded companies?
I am. I'm seeing a lot fewer SDR roles, a lot fewer conversations around that. And I'm hiring a lot of what I call full cycle sellers. Back 4 or 5 years ago, no way. Like you would just the seller would just get to sit there and wait for the discovery meeting to pop into their calendar. Not anymore. And here's the thing, like before I was also getting resistance from candidates. They're like, yeah, like I don't do that prospecting thing. Right. Like, not for me. I'm not hearing that much anymore at all. Like, and when I'm interviewing people, I'm like, hey, it looks like your last role was a full cycle seller. They're like, yep, start to finish, prospecting through closing. And now, again, for lots of reasons, I think this is not a bad thing by any means. I've always been an advocate of self-source deals, because self-source deals close faster, at a higher, close rate, like all of the reasons why you'd want somebody to be a full cycle seller or to self-source their own deals. I've always wanted AEs or quota carrying reps, if you want to call them that, to source 20, 25% of their own pipeline, as opposed to having come through other places. The other trend I am seeing is if there's an SDR team involved, they're pimping the demo. There's no qualification. There's very little qualification. They're literally just pimping the demo. And I can't stand it. And I call it, so when I'm working and training SDR teams, I'm like, here's how you earn the right to waste an AE's time, because that's really what pimping the demo is wasting so much of their time, because these people are not these prospects are not qualified. And so whether that's because of AI and automation, and it's so, in fairness, it's so much easier to get your ICP right and your persona right now. It's easier than ever before, right? If you've done all the ICP and persona work and you really have it tight, you've gotten it in writing, it's tight, it's tied down, then you just go into Zoom info or whatever and you're like, whoop, here are the 2,500 companies I'm going to be prospecting. And then, because people say all the time, I said, so here's the Kristieism. ICP isn't fit. There are two different things. Sure, you've got your 2,500 list of ICP companies. That doesn't mean they're fit. are
No.
different. And I think sales leaders are falling into this trap where like, oh my God, like we have refined our ICP like never before. And we've got all these whatever. That's not fit. So stop pimping the demo and putting garbage in the AE's calendar.
I've got a burning question, and it may not be totally on topic because I want to get to the impact of panic on decision making. But as you're talking about more full cycle AEs that are sourcing their own prospects and filling their own pipeline, are they doing any different activities than we've traditionally had the SDRs to do? Like, are they being taught and trained to just, pick up the phone and call like an SDR, send emails like an SDR? It's just now the AEs doing it themselves? Or is there new motions that are being introduced to that?
A little bit of both, like a little bit of like status quo. Here's your cadence or your sequence. Insert your people in. Yeah. I'm seeing a good number of those because perhaps the full cycle sellers weren't full cycle selling in the past, and they had those teams, but they were probably doing some sort of, let's say, targeted prospecting around key accounts, target accounts they've been given. They're used to a more customized and personalized approach, and so I am seeing more of that happening. Even if we're using, let's call it an email template, like leaving that first section where basically big parentheses, it says fill in personalization here and make that happen. I have been doing something interesting as a result of a client of mine doing something interesting. I have a client of mine who was reaching out and finding about 50% of his prospects on Reddit. He was giving, like he wasn't even anonymous, like he was giving, but he wasn't pitching. But he was commenting in communities that made sense for him. And so I too I was never on TikTok. I think Facebook is the root of all evil, but I'm now on Reddit, and because I want to know what people are saying. Like I'm just stalking, right? For the most part, I'm not really commenting, but today I saw a post with a guy that says, I'm burned out and I don't know what to do. And he's 2.5, 3 months in. But he picked an outside sales job where he lives out of his car every day. But that was not the job he had previously, where he was happy and the number 2 seller in the organization. And I'm like, dude, you picked the wrong job. Like you made a career mistake. Okay. Like let's give it, but like, it's not because he shouldn't be in sales necessarily. So Brandon, back to your other comment, and you didn't ask it specifically this way, but I'm going to throw this in. I'm seeing like, communities are the big thing right now, right? It's all about community. And that's where you can find prospects. That's where you can add value. That's where you can set yourself up as a subject matter expert. Again, do's and don'ts with communities, right? Don't go pitch your shit in the community. But I'm starting to see I've joined communities, I've been part of like Modern Sales Pros. I've been a part of that for years. I have Slack groups. Like when I need a 1099 to help me with my business and I just have a project, like a hiring project, a lot of times I hire out of work sales leaders for 3 weeks to help me phone screen and vet candidates. Like I don't have a full-time recruiter in my staff. I go post it on Rev Genius or Women in Sales or those type of sites, those communities, and go, hey, you out of work sales leaders who've been hiring your whole life, I got a 3-week project for you. And you're like, how about some extra cash and feeling purposeful and not just interviewing all the time. So I think communities are where the smart sellers, like if you talk about working smarter than harder, smart sellers are inserting themselves in communities, not only to hear what's going on and understand, trends and whatnot, but, to add value, and prospects will just appear.
Brandon, that sounds like it takes that whole relationship concept, right? I mean, we've obviously talked about community, but takes that relationship, that many to many relationship, rather than just the one-to-many relationship within the community.
Yeah, and I'm seeing that trend too with communities, and even traditionally over the last, several years, I probably would say that like LinkedIn groups are worthless because it's where people go and they pitch their stuff and there's no engagement, there's no comments, but we are seeing the right type of content is getting a lot of engagement. People are having conversations. They want to have those conversations. And it's a great place for people to build relationships, to learn, to network, and to get conversations with people. But you got to have the right content. And that's still the big challenge because people don't know how to think about the right content overall. They want to go in and pitch and go, I'm here. And then they do that for a week and then they go, groups don't work.
I hired a new marketing company recently. I'll pimp them here, 20 Mile Marketing. And the first thing that the owner of the company did was ask me for 10 names of 10 founders that I'd worked with in the past and 10 sales professionals. And she went and interviewed everybody. And what she found was that information was coming. They were going to two places for information about sales. One was LinkedIn, but the other one was Reddit. And when we dug deeper on the Reddit thing, the reason they went is because mostly it's anonymous. And it sounds counterintuitive, right? That you would take advice from somebody that you don't know what their credentials are, but it gave them a safe place. The majority of my ICP and our startups, but my personas from an individual contributor standpoint are white men between the ages of, 25 and 45. And so I think it was a safe place for them to go and say, like, I'm burned out, or like, I think my compensation plan is screwing me over. Like, what do you think? I think it's the anonymity, unlike LinkedIn, which has no anonymity whatsoever. Mm-hmm. It's a place for them to go like, hey, like, am I really getting screwed here? Or, like this happened and like, I lost this deal and here's why. And like, I'm confused and my manager's mad. And so.
Yeah. Reddit is very raw, right? Because you're not having to put if you want to call it a facade or something that exists potentially in LinkedIn. You hear a lot of comments about Reddit that it can be very negative, or people can be very basically dickheadish in the thing mm-hmm. as well. But I do think it's an opportunity to kind of get some raw data and see some of that raw, mm-hmm. what's really going on, right? Rather than being covered by the.
And raw is good. I think mm-hmm. we've a lot of people in LinkedIn, we are scared to be raw. We're scared to be totally mm-hmm. authentic. I mean, we talk a lot about authenticity in LinkedIn, and for most people, they go and then have no intention of being authentic. So having that opportunity to be a bit more raw, be a bit more authentic, and hide for a little bit while you're doing your research. And I think from a seller's perspective, what a great place. And I've popped in and out of Reddit. You've motivated me to get back in there.
Yep.
But yeah, from sellers is a great place to go. I mean, I would say go into Reddit and read what's going on and see, we talk about what are you observing? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Go in Reddit and assess those things, and then create your content from your personal brand and LinkedIn about this is what I'm observing. This is what's going on. And it's a great way to establish yourself as that SME. Because you're sharing information that's raw and real and into the masses.
That's a really good content. That's a good content hack, Brandon.
It is. I mean, and that's what we did. Like today, I would literally, right before you guys, I got off the phone with my weekly call with my marketing company, and she's like, "What are you seeing? What are you whatever?" And I'm like, "Well," I go, when I got on Reddit a couple weeks ago, I, signed up for all these sales channels, and I'm like, they're pinging me for things that they think I would be interested in, and I'm like, today was like, hey, like I'm burned out after like 3 months, like what the heck? And I read the thing and I go, they picked the wrong sales job. Like they're not like, he's rethinking his sales career. And I'm like, no, don't do that. Like you just picked the wrong role. Yeah. There's 70 plus roles out there. Like for people don't understand how many different sales roles there are and how hard it is to pick the right combination of things in order to make sure that you're happy and successful and earning the most income you could.
I want to go back to something just because I think it's very, very important for people to be listen to hear. And that is the observe, think, and feel. You just called it a content hack. And I hate the term hack. I'd rather call it a strategy and a system, but basically the same thing, right? When we bring our customers into our digital studio, we bring C-suite sales leaders in, their tendency is they want to pitch. And one of our hardest jobs is getting them to not pitch. And we ask those questions like, well, what are you observing is going on in your industry? What do you observe your customers are doing? What do you observe they're talking about? What do you observe that they're scared of? What do you think this means? And how do you feel this is going to influence them over the next 6 months? When you start to train yourself to think about observe, think, and feel, all kinds of very, very high quality, highly engaged content starts to come out, and you really train yourself to think differently, even about your own messaging. So whether you go into Reddit or you take your own calls with customers, look at the transcripts, look at even the AI summary of the transcripts and go, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
Not how do I sell this, but start with what's going on here. What's happening? What are they thinking? And turn that into your content. And whether you go into Reddit and you share that anonymously or somewhat anonymously, or you turn it into LinkedIn posts or LinkedIn articles, you're establishing yourself as a true SME. Mm-hmm. And if you want people to see you as an SME, you want them to see you as a trusted advisor, well, you got to provide trusted advice. And I think that's one of the easiest way to do it. And it's the hardest way to do it because we have to retrain our own thinking.
Mm-hmm. So Adam or Brandon, Adam really likes your hack, right? About taking the insights from Reddit to add value on LinkedIn.
Yep.
And I think that's a really
that was a Kristie Brandon collaboration there.
Okay.
Fist bump that out.
And Valinda is asking Kristie, other than Reddit, what were the other communities that you talk about that you may spend time in?
Yep. On Slack, I'm a Slacker. So Rev Genius, Women in Revenue, Women in Sales, Sales Blazer community. That'll get you started.
You said Modern Sales Pro as well, right?
And Modern Sales Pros is if you go into LinkedIn, they have a company page and you can join the community there.
Right.
And theirs is if I'm remembering correctly, it's a Google group, and so you get emails. It's not a Slack group.
That's correct. Yeah, we get emails. Again, same thing though. People looking for advice. So that's first time caller, long time listener. My CEO just made this mandate, and I don't know how to handle this or tell my team that the comp plan's changing mid-year, kind of thing.
So, okay, can I throw another pause, because I think this is relevant for everybody too. I would expect a lot of people, what they're hearing right now is, oh my gosh, I don't have time for this. That's a lot of work. Yeah. But I think the pedal harder, just make more calls, just make more emails. The motion might be easier for you because you're used to doing it, but it's not producing fruit. It's time to start pruning. Right? Train your tree differently to grow in different areas and produce that bigger, juicier fruit. But you're not going to do it just by doubling down, tripling down, and quadrupling down on the motions that you're comfortable with, even though they suck and they burn you out. That affair, I felt compelled that we had to kind of encapsulate that for people.
Well, and I'll add one more thing to that, right? We talk about this all the time. And Kristie, definitely interested in your take on this. To be successful, you've got to rise above the noise. There's so much noise, right? How are you going to ride above the noise is being a bit extraordinary in how you're doing things. And what we're talking about here is presenting yourself a bit more extraordinary compared to the average guy or average gal that's out there really trying to just say, buy my stuff, how many phone calls can I make? There's no other way to rise above the noise, right? So it's not that it takes more time, it's just more efficient and more effective, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, what's your personal differentiator? Right? I mean, we talk about this all the time in companies. I'm like, they're like, well, we're a commodity or whatever. And I'm like, well, what's your differentiator? And they go, our service is better. I'm like, prove it. Prove it. Like, no, it's not. You'd like to think that you're giving white glove 5-star 20-minute turnaround service, but you might not be. So, but what's your personal differentiator? So said differently, I'm talking a lot about people's sales superpowers. Like, what's your superpower? What do you do better than your coworkers and your competitors? What can you lean into and leverage that when the chips are down, right? And companies are laying people off, or it's harder to get the sale closed or whatever. What do you feel confident in leaning into that says, if I leverage my superpower at this point in time, I should be able to outsell and out-earn my coworkers and my competition. But I'll get woo-woo because Brandon loves it when I get woo-woo. But people are not spending enough time, get to know yourself before you get to know the prospect, right? And that goes into this, you're putting yourself in the wrong sales role. And stop, I'm so tired of hearing about only 43% of sellers are hitting quota. Okay, I live in the Series A VC startup world. feces are part of the problem, right? Some of these quotas are unreal. Some of these revenue goals are unrealistic, right? They're unattainable. That's ridiculous. But also, perhaps you're only getting to 60% of quota because you aren't owning your own shit around the fact that you took the wrong role, selling the wrong thing that you're not passionate about, to enterprise instead of mid-market, where you thrive, with the wrong company and with the wrong value system, or the wrong company and the wrong pricing and the wrong boss. Maybe that's why you're at 60% of quota instead of saying the revenue target's unattainable. I'm not saying for everybody.
That's probably yeah. Well, and I think that's a good transition to our first big question is and topic around the impact of panic decision making.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're not being so. We talked about I'm doing a ton of hiring, right? I just threw out about 3 clients I'm was actively hiring for in the last 30 days. And I'm seeing everything from people applying because they have been laid off, people applying because they're afraid they may be laid off, or people applying, I call it passive lookers. I was bored Sunday afternoon, NBA, my team's out of the NBA playoffs, and I just started poking around jobs on LinkedIn, and this looked interesting, and other reasons. But the reason variety is all over the board. Everybody wants to talk about the turnover and the layoffs or whatever. I've never been busier. Normally 40% of my business is hiring help. It's year to date, it's going to be 75 coming out of this quarter easily. And I'm busy as I've ever been trying to help people hire people. And so there's a job out there if you want it, but maybe the reason why you're only getting to 60% of quota and all of the other things that you're frustrated about is because you aren't staying at any job for 3 years. So that's potentially the panic that causes bad decisions. You're I'm only at 60% of quota. I'm probably need to come, leave this job and go to another one. Well, how about you just buckle down, double down? And I say to people, I'm you're really not, I don't know how you would expect to be successful in under 3 years, right? The first year, just trying to figure the whole damn thing out, right? Processes, the people, the questions you're supposed to ask, how, all of that, all the sales processes type stuff. Year 2, you're okay, got that. Now, how do I make that work for me? How do I Christieize that? How do I personalize that? How do I play to my superpower? How do I use my my sales secret weapons? And by the way, it was if in SaaS, if 20% of deals close, which by the way is almost generous right now, 16% of deals are going to close. Let's say 100 deals. Let's say you run 100 deals through your pipeline. Well, that's 84% of deals that aren't closing. And I call them not right nows. I don't call them no's. They're not right nows for a reason. If you really have narrowed down your ICP and you're pulling that stuff out of Zoom Info or whatever, it's coming inbound. These are people that potentially should or could be customers at some point. But by the time they have the pain is big enough to need you, you're gone. You're at another company selling something else in another segment, another vertical. So you go to all that trouble to work so hard to build up your pipeline. And then all of a sudden, you've worked all that time and all that hard. And then all of a sudden you're those 84% of people, 84 people that you talked to this year that were in your pipeline and year 2, 170 some odd people that are future customers. You've worked all that time and then you leave.
So, hey, I have a couple questions here. When you're seeing salespeople lose their job,
Mm-hmm.
And I know it probably varies from company to company, but are you seeing that in a lot of cases where they're at the highest risk is if they're missing quota and these quotas that may be inflated or unrealistic, or is it more because they're not, as you just said, at least making an attempt to exercise their superpower and be that A-team player, right? I would think if I have an A-team player, and even if they're not making quota, they're not going to be at risk. But if I've got somebody who's not really trying to develop themselves and make themselves be all they can be, those are the people at risk.
Yeah, you're right. It's a little bit of a mixed bag, but I am seeing, and it's funny. So statistically speaking, the stats I threw out earlier, go to HubSpot, go to anybody, fewer than 50% of people are hitting quota, but not when I interview them. All the candidates I interview are within 80% of hitting quota, right? So first and foremost, that's not possible, but okay. I'll play the game. I'm like, okay, like, but
Well,
where
whose
are these?
quota? Maybe
Where
they're
are
hitting
these
their own
other people?
quota.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Oh, where are these other people who aren't hitting quota?
Yeah.
And so when I look at all those candidates, there are top 10 percenters being let go, right? For no fault of their own in some cases, right? Like I talked to a guy this morning. I got referred, like I do this all the time. My Christieism is I've got 30 minutes for everyone, and people regularly take me up on this. And so a former employee of mine who worked with this guy who had left that company and gone to another, he's now at a very, very early stage, like sub $1 million early stage startup. And he's like, I'm not sure this is for me. And I talked to him this morning and he said, I was a top 10 percenter. And they eliminated this was a UK based company, and they eliminated the entire North American team.
Okay.
No fault of your own.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, nothing you've done there, no fault of your own.
Right.
But I also think that, to your point, yes. And so here's the number one answer I'm getting to a question that I ask every single candidate. Tell me about the professional soft skills sales training that you've been provided at previous employers. And well over 60% say I haven't. And so here's the follow-up question. If you interview with me, be ready. So what have you done for yourself? Yeah. And if the answer is nothing, and then I follow that up with, who do you follow? Like, who do you follow? What podcast do you listen to? What books are you reading? What webinars are you attending? And if your answer is like, this is also one of those popular answers. Well, like I follow a bunch of people. I can't come up with the names right now. And my podcast list is kind of varied. And I'm like, okay, so you're not a lifelong learner. You're not owning your own shit around your personal and professional development. And so, yes, shame on your sales leader for not teaching you what you deserve to have been taught. But in the absence of that, because we talked a little bit about, I think before we hit the record button, that top salespeople are being promoted to sales leader, but they don't know what the hell they're doing. And so the sales professionals underneath them are not getting the training that they need. But it is easier than ever. Hey, LinkedIn Learning. Hey, Udemy.
Yeah.
Hey, Sales Gravy University.
Yeah.
Hey, every podcast that has the word sales in it. Hey, hey guys. We literally, one of the companies I'm hiring the 3 AEs for is an e-learning company. So one of the number one competencies that we're looking for is lifelong learner, and taking responsibility for that. And we got one of those answers, and we loved him. Every other answer we loved him. And I got off the phone with the HR manager, and I'm like, we cannot move him forward. She goes, oh, good. I'm glad you understand. I go, yeah, hello. I'm like, no, took no accountability for his own personal professional development.
So there's two scenarios, right? Brandon, you back, looks like, and
I am. Sorry about that. It got loud. My outside office neighbors landscapers decided to do some work.
I thought you were going to say cicadas. That's what I'm dealing with.
Yeah, I've heard that.
I could not go outside today because the cicadas would make you all crazy.
So if I'm looking for a job, I'm looking for a sales role. Do you have like is there a checklist of things that I should be doing, almost a self-assessment on, that says, hey, I'm looking for, and maybe it's not even, I just know I want a job in sales, right? Mm-hmm. So what is it, the assessment I should be doing for myself, and even kind of a plan for myself to say, how am I going to have the highest probability of finding the right position and being successful, over the next 2 to 4 years, right? Not successful in the next, and there could be a definition of success in 6 months, but it's, as you pointed out, it's hard to really be successful in 6 months or 12 months or 18 months when you're leaving there. So what would you kind of tell people as kind of a self assessment that they should do?
Yeah, everybody talks about strengths, but I'm talking about superpowers, because superpowers are strengths that you have had intentionally honed, right? Developing something happens over time organically. Just so I play tennis. I use this example. I play tennis. My tennis superpower is my forehand slice. Now, I got my forehand slice because I grew up playing racquetball. So it did come naturally to me, but I developed it over time because every time I step on the court, the situation is different.
Okay.
right? My opponent is different. The surface is different. Am I inside or am I outside? How's the damn lighting in the in the inside venue? Lighting changes dramatically. What balls am I playing with? What, all of that. So my forehand slices, even though it was natural, I've developed it over time just by getting on the court as often as I do. But I hone it because one summer I decided I wanted to make it really nasty. And so I hired a coach. And then I spent an hour with him a week, and he made me spend 5 hours a week at the wall. Big brick wall, 2-story at the junior high up the street from me. Put my headset on with my loud music, took my one tennis ball, it's all I needed, and my racket. And I was developing muscle memory. So what I say to sales reps is, that's the example I use, how I honed it. I developed it over time just by stepping on the court, but that wasn't going to make it nasty. Making it nasty means I had to practice that and get muscle memory around it. Well, instead of muscle memory for sales, I call it mental memory. So every time this happens, I do this. It's rote. I don't have to think about it. I know, because that's my superpower, that this works. So Tom, back to your question, so my universal superpower is generosity. When you go back in time, when I was a teenager, I used to affectionately say, hey, I used to have remember we used to have call-in, we're so old, the three of us, that remember the call-in talk shows, like the call-in shows, like you could call in and give your, here's my problem, I need my advice. So I called it Cry with Kristie. And I'm like, the phone lines were open between 7 and 8 o'clock, Monday through Friday. And I've just always been one of those people that I'm compartmentalizer. I'm not super emotional. In case of a 4-alarm fire or death, you should put me on your in case of emergency line and my phone number. And so people would call me regularly, oh my God, I got an F on the test. My parents don't know yet. What am I going to do? Oh my gosh. My boyfriend kissed Susie at the party. I saw it happen. Now I don't know what to do. I lost my job. I haven't told my parents yet. What am I going to do? Everybody would call. Right. And I would be voice of reason. My son calls me dream killer. I prefer voice of reason. And so,
yeah, well,
if you go back in time, but it wasn't until I was in my 40s that I realized this. I have 30 minutes for everyone. That's my superpower. People come to me, and now as my dad would say, and now instead of firing you for shooting your big mouth off and telling people shit that they don't want to hear, people pay you. He goes, it's genius, this consulting thing you've built yourself around, right? And so I'm like, people need to stop and think about, it probably was a strength they had literally as a teenager or a child that got developed over time. But if you're not sure, what do you do better than everybody else? What's everybody in the office come and ask you questions about? Ask your friends and family. They see you more clearly than you may see yourself. Those are the kind of questions that you're gonna have to ask yourself. And then all of a sudden it becomes clear. My friends would be like, oh, well, anytime I'm emotional or upset, I call you because you become the voice of reason, and it's never as bad as I think it is. Now, they wouldn't have said my generosity.
Can I?
Yeah.
Can I sign up for 30 minutes with Kristie
Yes.
and her voice of reason? I'm pumped up, motivated, ready to go. Let's do a session.
And I wouldn't have called that, by the way. I don't think my friends would say to you, they would say Kristie's superpower is firefighter. And I would agree with that. That is actually my business superpower. It's also my universal superpower too, is firefighter, 4-alarm firefighter. And I, never get burned like everybody else is on, hair's on fire, but mine's not. But for me, that's generosity, right? My people in my life mean a lot to me. And even people like Brandon or Tom, if you sent me somebody, again, the guy this morning, he said, Becky said I should call you, that you might be able to help me. And I'm like, sure, I got 30 minutes for everything. Here's my Calendly link. I met him, and he was like, thank you so much for just listening to me. And I'm like, well, sure. Because I feel like I have an obligation. If I know something that you don't, I feel like I'm obligated to share that with you. I grew up in a family where finances were very transparent. I knew what my parents made. I knew every time a commission check came in. My mother was a real estate agent, 100% commission. My dad was an owner broker of a real estate company. I have financial acumen. I have financial literacy in ways that other people don't. So one of the things I do is teach junior achievement, because every single grade in junior achievement's curriculum involves money. And I want them to see women. I want girls to see women, and even men to see women coming into the classroom saying, yep, I pay my own bills. I run my own company. I do all this, I set my own prices. So I'm just saying, I think it's easier than people think it is. But then once you identify your superpower, I think that part's going to be easier. But then you have to, develop it, hone it, pressure test it, and then leveraging it. Like for me, going back to my tennis example, me leveraging my superpower, my slice more hand, I can leverage it best when my opponent has topspin, because then I get to take the ball in my sweet spot every single time. If my opponent is also a slicer, then I know it's going to be a long, miserable day for me, because that ball is never going to be exactly where I want it. So I'm not going to be able to leverage my superpower, right? I'm going to use my slice because it's what I have, but I also have topspin if I need it. So like, I just don't think people are taking time to think all of those things through, just in general. And then they sure as hell not thinking them through before they go and apply, because they wouldn't be applying to 40 jobs in a week. They'd be applying to 4.
Well, and let's say you sort that out, or you have an idea, right? You may not have it perfectly honed, but you do the exercise that you just went through. You have an idea of kind of what makes you extraordinary or special. How do you take that then into an interview with a prospective, company, and not come off as either cocky or arrogant, or they feel like, well, they didn't really answer my questions? Or how does that get translated to something that then says, hey, I really want to hire this person?
Well, first off, I want to say that I think if you figured all that out, then you don't even have to wait for someone to post a job. If you've done your homework and you figured out what your superpower is, and you figure out how you can leverage it in a particular organization, like, hey, I really should be selling this in this space with this, whatever, then you can reach out to the VP of sales of the CRO and say, hey, I'm looking for my next opportunity. Here's why. I went to your careers page and I didn't see anything, but I would love for you to donate 15 minutes to the cause, just so you can learn a little bit more about me, just to see if in the future there might be something, a way for us to work together. But in the interview, I mean, like, I actually just ask what your superpower is. So let's just say that not everybody's the interviewer that asking these crazy questions like I am. But I do think, like, there's nothing wrong with saying that. Like, hey, and even if they ask, like, if they're even, what are your strengths, or what makes you, like, one of the questions I ask during the phone screen is, tell me how you left the organization better than you found it. Or how are you going to leave the organization better than you found it? That's in the phone screen. I only give 30 minutes for phone screen. But if you can't articulate to me in the phone screen that you did more than what the job description asked you to do, then you're not an A player. Pass. So, like, I think you're going to get opportunities, Tom. And they may not come out and ask them like I do. Like, so what's your sales superpower? They may not ask it that way, but they're going to ask it in a way like you have to hear it for what it is and then insert your superpower answer into the question.
But I think this goes back to your panic statement, right? If you've got that worked out and you have confidence in that for yourself, whether you're proactively looking for a job, like you are proactively reaching out, or you get on an interview or whatever, you just have the confidence on what you're going to bring to the table. And if it's not a fit, it won't be, you'll find out, right? So if it's okay that it's not a fit.
Right.
And I think where the panic comes in is where people go, oh my God, I didn't make this one. I didn't make this one. I didn't make this one. Because they don't really know where the right fit is. They don't know if they got to the right place, if I actually got to the right place.
Yeah. And I think it's like, again, yeah, go ahead.
I was say it's confusion that creates more confusion, which creates more confusion. So you get to the point and you go, shit, who am I? Right? Because if you don't go into that, and I think whether you go into a sales, like a prospecting call, a first call, or it's a job interview, it's the same thing. You have to have your plan. You have to be prepared and try to lead the conversation where you want it to go to get the information you need. I think when you're looking for a job, you want to go in prepared to be able to take the conversation to your strengths and what you want to disclose about yourself, not just respond, and then go, I didn't get to really share the best parts of myself because the interviewer didn't set you up the right way. Does that sound accurate, Kristie?
Yeah, I'm back to own your own shit again, Brandon. But Tom, you said something that I wanted to stop on, is you said use the word fit, which I use all the time. Not every job is a fit for you. And this is also where panic causes bad decisions. So if I'm not going to go deep here, but like, if you're somebody who's living paycheck to paycheck, even if you're making a good income because you don't have discipline around finances and you don't have that 3-month nest egg, that causes panic. If you haven't built out your network, So, when I went into consulting because I got laid off. I lost my job. And because of my superpower of generosity, I had been giving and giving and giving, but I hadn't cashed in any chips. And I started reaching out to people in my network and saying, I need introductions. Here's what I need. Here's what I'm looking for. And everything that I have today ties back to one individual. His name is Dean Pache. He's the owner of Biz Library. I worked for him as his sales leader for 10 years. Our parting after that time, we did not part well. And a few months after that, he reached out and asked if we could grab a beer. And this is where my superpower generosity came in again, because my first response was, oh, hell no. Like, I don't think so, friend. But we had 10 years of a personal and professional relationship. And he introduced me, like, actually the first 3 clients I got were all introductions from him. Like, he is my Kevin Bacon, right? Everything tied back to him. But that's the guy who, when I left the previous career I had, I was looking for a company and not a job. And, he wouldn't refer me to his golf friends, kept me for himself. But like, I had obviously convinced him that my skill set, would fit. Like, I wasn't thinking I was going to work for him ever, like never. So I just think, like, if you're Brandon, I love what you said, but Tom, I love what you said. Like, I say to candidates, here's how we're going to go through this process. So, which is PS, just how I would handle a prospect, right? So here's our process. Here's my process before I might send you an SOW and we sign, create a deal. I'm like, the first half of our sales cycle, of our interview cycle, our hiring cycle, is going to be all us figuring out if you're qualified, if you're a fit for us. But then I say, then I'm going to flip the script and I'm going to let you figure out if we're a fit for you. Because I tell candidates, you're going to know way before I will, after 4 hours with you. Let's just say I spend 4 hours with them in total before I make an offer. You will know way before I will whether this is a good or a bad idea, right? Because you've been living with yourself for 37 years and I've known you for 4 hours. So, but I've got to give you, I said, I need to make you an educated candidate, just like I would make an educated consumer. I've got to give you enough information by letting you talk to other people in the organization, talk to former employees, talk to current employees. Again, some of that work you should be doing on your own. You can reach out on LinkedIn to people and ask to talk to them. But I need to give you enough information because I want to make sure that because if we do it that way, there's a much more likely that fit is going to happen and you are going to be successful here. But I also need you to be honest with yourself and saying, it's okay. Like, sorry, I'm taking myself out of the equation. Thank you for letting me get educated. I don't think I can be as successful here as I can other places. And that's fine. Like, I applaud that.
And do you coach along that line to think, again, if I'm looking for a sales job, think for a minimum of 3 years, if not longer, so that am I going into this that I'm at least thinking from that horizon?
I talk about it. I don't know if people are listening, Tom.
Okay.
Talking about it. Yeah, I mean, so I take the example of this. My brother and I talk about this all the time. So we both grew up in the same family. And I took my dad's path as a leader and he took my mom's path as an individual contributor. And the majority of the income he makes is off commission. And he's been in his industry with his company for 24 years. He got there at 26 and is not left. And he says, there is no way that I would be making the money I'm making with a lake house and a boat and college being paid for. And my kids are 10 and 13. He's like, if I had jumped, he's in staffing. If I had jumped from staffing company to staffing company over the years, and I was at my 10th job instead of my first job, my second, it was not his first job out of college, but his first staffing job. He said, there's no way I'd be where I'm at today. No way. And it's hard to argue with.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and he's got a good life and he's built those relationships and he's got, a good account. Like he earned his right to a top account in Kansas City. And, plant managers come and go, if you will, but HR managers don't come and go as often. And so the relationships that he's built there have put him in a position where he's a trusted advisor.
Well, and I get it, right. Look, most salespeople, like anybody, of course you need a paycheck, but a lot of times we're all looking beyond the paycheck, right?
Mhm.
We're not just looking to get our paycheck. We're looking for the upside that we have. And that upside may be longer down the road than 6 months, 12 months, or 18 months, especially in B2B and especially in this day and age.
Yep.
So I think it's a very interesting viewpoint to be thinking about if you're going to look for that next job and say, God, where can I really, really take advantage of my superpower and get that result over 2, 3, even 4 years or longer along the way. So it's a different mindset than, hey, is there a get rich quick opportunity on the next, 6 months or whatever?
Yeah, and I think it's short-sighted. It's that I talked to a candidate today that is one of the final 6 candidates for these 3 AE positions. And he said, I knew he was interviewing with a couple of others, 2 to 3 others. He said, I've eliminated 1. I'm down to 2 others as opposed to you. And I said, great, I'm ready to put you in front of the CRO, which will be the last step. And he said, okay. And I said, tell me what your buying criteria is. He just looked at me and he goes, what? I go, 3 companies. What's your buying criteria? Like, how are you going to make this decision? And he said, oh, so we read off his criteria. And he said, in fairness, like, you guys have one of the lower base salaries. And I said, great. I said, but what if we had one of the larger upsides? And he goes, oh. And I said, this is one of the most generous variable compensation plans I've ever seen. Like, let me throw out the word 25% and see how you react to that. Now, that's on a 3-year contract. That's after a certain other gate, right?
Sure.
But isn't anybody out there offering 25% commission on anything? I don't care how many years it is. And he was like, oh. And I said, I'm going to send you the comp plan. I said, I'm not doing this with any other candidate, but you're looking for $100,000 and I'm not going to be able to get you that in base. But I said, I'd rather you think about your total OTE and what that looks like. And so I got off the call. I was actually with the sales leader, not the CRO, but the VP of sales had joined me on that call. And he got the call and he goes, that was an interesting strategy. And I go, what are you talking about? He goes, well, showing the comp plan. I go, that's not a strategy. That was the right thing to do. He didn't have all the information he needed to be an educated consumer. So how am I going to ask him to take a chance on me if he does, to take a lower base salary than he wants and probably has had in the past without having all the information? So I had no choice. I had not shown that to any other candidate until I'd gotten, until I'm preparing to make offers. So I also think people in there, like in the hiring, are rigid, right? Like, I think this is one of the reasons why, even though someone has HR, I mentioned that this organization has an HR department and recruiters, but they hired me to hire their sales reps because HR doesn't always get sales, right? Sales is a little bit of a specialty. And I don't think anybody in HR would have done what I did.
So, our hour is almost up, which has gone by.
As it always is. I'm like, what is the 2-hour session?
Questions, but Brandon, what are some final things we need to touch on here before we wrap up?
I think we wrap up with this. I think that this was a unique show for us, and yet I also think it was very needed. It's we had very little comments and engagements compared to normal shows, but I think this was just so information rich. Kristie, you brought amazing information for people, whether they're job searching or they're in a current job or they're hiring, that I think as we move into, we talk about it's modern selling. It's everything we're doing is in this new environment. It's in this new world. And I think you're leading the way with helping people know themselves to lead themselves. And there just hasn't been enough of that in our business culture, especially over the last 15 to 20 years, where it's just been a lot of get what you can get and move to the next the next thing and get more and get more and get more. And now that dance is over, I think people need to get back to some of these basics. And it's not saying what you're talking about is basic, but it's the basics, but that most people don't know and don't do. I know I've learned a lot of things from the hiring side that have really made me think a lot.
Good.
We have a very special listener here that said it was a fabulous conversation. So
I know, I saw that. Man, that's high praise. Somebody who's listened to
right.
every word of every episode that we've ever
really
done.
Oh, yeah. This is your groupie.
No, that's my wife. So
Oh, who is your groupie?
Same thing.
Come on,
Same
Lauren.
thing.
Groupie, wife,
Groupie. You got
yeah,
groupies. I
that's
love
high
it.
praise, Lauren. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Lauren. Yes, I did not know how special the listener was.
you know what I'm really thinking about too, and I really promise not to go down a rabbit hole when we have less than 5 minutes left. But this whole idea of understanding your superpower, understanding what you do well as an individual, that certainly can elevate to a company, especially an early stage startup.
Oh, yeah.
Because, and I look at my software company and I look at the growth that we've had over even the last 6 months. It's because we really have identified what we really do well and who cares, right? What customer really cares about what we do well.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some that don't care at all. But when we find the ones that really care about what we do well, the velocity of the deal, the quality of the deal, the size of the deal, everything comes together that much faster and better. And so the same concept could be taken to a business as much as it is an individual along the way.
For sure.
So,
Yeah,
all right,
that's
Kristie,
good. Let's wrap.
where can people find out more about you? Your book's coming out in August, you said, right?
It is. Yep. So Selling Your Way In, the playbook for setting your income and owning your life. And it is all about what I talked about today. It's all about fit, right? It's all about finding your right place in the sales universe to be as successful as you can be, however you define that, earn the most income, that you can earn. I would love for you to connect on LinkedIn. I love when I do this, somebody reaching out on LinkedIn and telling me about your one takeaway. If you have more than one, tell me about your takeaways and what really resonated today, because I really am, again, I didn't want to write a book on sales how-to, right? I didn't want to write a how-to book. I just think there's so many people that are, again, unhappy, that are losing their jobs, that are quitting their jobs, that are whatever, because they just haven't figured out the right sales formula for them and put themselves in the best place to be successful.
Great.
I was prepared with, expecting Carson to show up. I knew today I had a quote. It reminded me of the movie. It reminded me of Hunger Games, where Plutarch talks about its moves and counter moves. And I kept thinking about that today. Everything you're talking about, it's you got to first start at that foundation. You got to know yourself to lead yourself, but then it's moves and counter moves. It's that constant flow of positioning yourself in the smart way.
Yep. I call them step changes, career step changes. Keep making the right career step changes. And that may not mean every 18 months.
Well, thank you for the comment also from Valinda. She also enjoyed your position and perspectives.
Thank you.
So wait for Linda, and Butch was too busy listening to ask questions. So, all right.
That's a good thing. Well, hey, for everybody, and Valinda especially, who's become a friend of mine over the years, thank you for joining us today and being with us on Mastering Modern Selling. We'll see you next week. I started to look. I totally forgot. We'll have Carson back next week. And,
no, I think
forgot who our guest is.
In the Caribbean next week.
Oh,
you're right. Cruise. That's Carson. Right.
It's one of these days, I think maybe before Christmas, we'll get all three of us back together again. So
it's been a while.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you guys for having me on again. It's always a very, very engaging conversation.
We'll get you back for 3.5 soon.